Welcome to today's episode of Ancient Echoes, where we uncover the hidden stories of our extinct human relatives. Picture this. A Neanderthal father kneels beside his teenage daughter as she struggles with a broken leg. Around them, the harsh Siberian winter howls through their cave entrance. Does he abandon her to save the group's resources? Or does something deeper, something profoundly human, guide his actions? For over 150 years, we've painted Neanderthals as brutish cavemen who lived harsh, uncaring lives. We imagined them as creatures driven solely by survival, incapable of the tender bonds that define human families. But revolutionary new discoveries are shattering these misconceptions, revealing a truth so extraordinary it rewrites the story of human compassion itself. Recent breakthroughs in ancient DNA analysis have allowed scientists to peer directly into Neanderthal family structures for the first time. We've discovered fathers buried alongside their children, evidence of disabled individuals cared for throughout their entire lives, and dental records that tell stories of nurturing that lasted years beyond what we ever imagined possible. How did these remarkable beings, our closest extinct relatives, raise their young? What can their parenting practices teach us about the deep roots of human love and care? And why might their approach to childhood have ultimately determined not just their children's fate, but the destiny of their entire species? Today, we're about to discover that the story of Neanderthal parenting isn't just about them. It is about understanding what makes us human. Chapter 1. The Discovery of Family Bonds. The bitter wind cuts through the Altai Mountains of Siberia as our story begins 54,000 years ago. In the depths of Shagarskaya Cave, something extraordinary is unfolding that scientists wouldn't discover until 2022. A small group of Neanderthals has sought shelter from the relentless cold. But this isn't just any random collection of individuals. This is a family. Dr. Lawrence Skov never expected to become a detective of ancient emotions. As a computational biologist at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology, he was analyzing genetic data from Neanderthal remains when something unprecedented emerged from the molecular evidence. Among the fragments of teeth and bone recovered from 2 Siberian caves lay the genetic signatures of the first confirmed Neanderthal family, relationships ever documented by science. The breakthrough came through advances in ancient DNA technology that seemed impossible just decades ago. Working with colleagues from the Russian Academy of Sciences, Skov's team extracted genetic material from 17 Neanderthal remains, the largest collection of Neanderthal genomes ever sequenced in a single study. What they found revolutionized our understanding of these ancient people. The genetic analysis revealed something that made Skov's team pause in wonder. Among the remains were those of a Neanderthal father and his teenage daughter. Their DNA told an unmistakable story of biological kinship, but more than that, it painted a picture of a family that had lived, survived, and died together. The fact that their remains were found in the same cave layers suggested they had shared not just genes, but daily life. The discovery didn't stop there. The genetic evidence also revealed a pair of second-degree relatives, a young boy and an adult female, perhaps his cousin, aunt, or grandmother. These weren't isolated individuals struggling alone against the harsh Ice Age environment. They were part of an intricate web of family relationships that provided support, protection, and emotional bonds that transcended mere survival. Dr. Penny Spikins of the University of York had long suspected that Neanderthal family life was far more complex than traditionally believed. Her research into Neanderthal burials had revealed patterns that suggested deep emotional attachments, particularly toward children. The Shagarskaya discovery provided the genetic proof she had been seeking for decades. The cave itself tells part of the story. Archaeological evidence shows that this wasn't a temporary shelter, but a place where families returned repeatedly. Stone tools found in the layers match materials from locations dozens of kilometers away, suggesting these Neanderthals maintained wide territories and possibly traded with other groups. The presence of family groups in the cave over time indicates that Chagerskaya wasn't just a refuge, it was a home. But what truly astounded researchers was the revelation of group size. The genetic diversity among these Neanderthals was extraordinarily low, suggesting their community comprised only 10 to 20 individuals. This level of genetic similarity is typically seen in endangered species on the brink of extinction, like mountain gorillas today. Yet rather than indicating dysfunction, this small group size appears to have fostered incredibly close family bonds. The mitochondrial DNA told another crucial part of the story. Unlike nuclear DNA, mitochondrial DNA passes from mother to child, creating an unbroken genetic line through generations. The analysis showed much higher diversity in mitochondrial DNA and a Y chromosome, DNA, which passes from father to son. This pattern revealed something remarkable about Neanderthal social organization. Young women typically left their birth families to join their mates' groups, while men remained with their fathers and brothers throughout their lives. This patriarchal system, where wives moved to their husbands' families, is common in many modern human societies and speaks to sophisticated social organization. It suggests that Neanderthal families weren't isolated units, but part of larger networks connected through female migration. Young women would have brought new knowledge, skills, and genetic diversity to their adopted groups, strengthening both family bonds and survival prospects. The discovery of the father-daughter pair carries particular emotional weight. Their remains show no signs of immediate trauma or disease, suggesting they may have died together during a harsh winter or food shortage. The father's protective presence beside his teenage daughter speaks to bonds that transcended simple reproductive necessity. Even in death, they remained together. The implications extend far beyond this single family. The Chagerskaya discoveries represent the first direct genetic evidence of Neanderthal kinship structures, providing a window into social organization that has remained hidden for millennia. These weren't the brutish loners of popular imagination, but people who formed deep, lasting family bonds that shaped every aspect of lives. Archaeological evidence from the site supports this picture of family life. The cave contains evidence of sophisticated tool-making, controlled use of fire, and organized living spaces that suggest complex social interactions. The family groups that sheltered here weren't just surviving. They were creating homes where children could learn, grow, and develop the skills necessary for their harsh world. As we'll discover in the chapters ahead, this genetic proof of family bonds opens the door to understanding how Neanderthal parents raised their children. Chapter 2. The Nursing Years. In the flickering firelight of a French cave 250,000 years ago, a Neanderthal mother cradles her infant against the winter cold. Her breath forms clouds in the frigid air as she nurses her child, unaware that the minerals in her milk are creating a permanent record in her baby's developing teeth, a record that modern scientists will read like a diary of maternal devotion. Dr. Tanya Smith of Griffith University in Brisbane has spent years perfecting the delicate art of reading these ancient stories. Using polarized light microscopy, she can trace the daily growth lines in Neanderthal teeth, much like counting tree rings. What she discovered in the teeth of two Neanderthal children from the Payer site in France, Rhone Valley, revolutionized our understanding of the earliest stages of Neanderthal childhood. The technique relies on a remarkable mineral called barium, which surges in children's teeth when they consume their mother's milk. By tracking these barium spikes, Smith could determine exactly how long Neanderthal mothers nursed their babies. The results were surprising. Both Neanderthal children had nursed for 2.5 years before being weaned, significantly longer than previously estimated for any ancient human species. This extended nursing period reveals something profound about Neanderthal mothers' commitment to their children. In the harsh Ice Age environment where calories were precious and survival uncertain, dedicating resources to nursing for over 2 years represents an enormous investment. A nursing mother requires substantially more nutrition than a non-nursing woman, and her mobility may be limited by the needs of her dependent child. Yet Neanderthal mothers made this sacrifice willingly and consistently. The dental evidence from multiple sites across Europe shows that extended nursing wasn't unusual, it was the norm. These mothers were providing their children with optimal nutrition during the critical early years when brain development occurs most rapidly. Modern research shows that breast milk contains unique compounds that support neural development, suggesting Neanderthal mothers were giving their babies the best possible start in life. The chemical signatures in the children's teeth tell other stories of maternal care. Oxygen isotope ratios reveal seasonal variations in the mother's diet and water sources, showing how she adapted her own nutrition to maintain milk production through harsh winters and food shortages. During the coldest months, when resources were scarce, these mothers continued nursing despite their own nutritional stress. The teeth also preserve evidence of the children's health throughout their nursing years. Both Neanderthal children show fewer stress lines, indicators of illness or malnutrition, during their nursing period compared to after weaning. This suggests that their mother's milk provided consistent, high-quality nutrition that buffered them against environmental hardships that would have affected children fed on solid foods alone. But nursing wasn't just about nutrition. Modern research on attachment theory shows that the act of nursing creates profound emotional bonds between mother and child. The extended nursing period in Neanderthal families would have strengthened these bonds, creating relationships built on trust, comfort, and security. Children who nursed for over 2 years would have formed deep attachments to their mothers that influenced their social development throughout childhood. The timing of weaning also reveals sophisticated understanding of child development. At 2.5 years, children have developed enough teeth to handle a varied solid food diet, but they're still young enough to benefit from the immunological protection provided by breast milk. This suggests Neanderthal mothers were responding to their children's individual developmental needs rather than following rigid timelines. The weaning process itself appears to have been gradual and nurturing. Rather than abrupt cessation of nursing, the barium signatures show a slow decline over several months, indicating that mothers gradually reduce nursing frequency while introducing more solid foods. This gentle transition would have minimized stress for both mother and child while ensuring adequate nutrition throughout the changeover. The commitment to extended nursing becomes even more remarkable when we consider the broader context of Neanderthal family life. These groups were constantly moving in search of resources, following animal migrations and seasonal food sources. A mother nursing a 2-year-old would have faced significant mobility constraints, yet the group clearly accommodated these needs. This suggests that Neanderthal communities valued the health and development of their children enough to adjust their entire lifestyle around parenting demands. Archaeological evidence supports this picture of mother-child devotion. Neanderthal cave sites often contain special areas that appear designed for childcare, with protective alcoves and carefully maintained fire sites that would have provided safe, warm spaces for nursing mothers and their infants. The arrangement of these spaces suggests that the entire group participated in creating environments that supported the intensive parenting required during the nursing years. The nutritional stress revealed in mothers' dental records tells another part of the story. Many Neanderthal women show evidence of having redirected their own nutrition to maintain milk production, sometimes at the cost of their own health. This maternal sacrifice mirrors behaviors seen in modern human mothers and speaks to the deep evolutionary roots of parental devotion. The discovery of lead exposure in the 2 Neanderthal children adds a darker dimension to their story. Both children were exposed to lead at least twice during their nursing years, representing the earliest known evidence of lead poisoning in human ancestors. Lead mines located just 25 kilometers from their cave site may have contaminated local water sources or food supplies. Yet, despite this environmental hazard, their mothers continued to nurse them, providing what protection they could through their milk's immunological properties. The seasonal variations recorded in the children's teeth paint a vivid picture of a mother's year-round dedication. During summers, when plant foods were abundant and hunting successful, both mother and nursing child thrived. But winter brought its own challenges. The oxygen isotope signatures show that mothers often experienced nutritional stress during the coldest months. Yet they maintained milk production for their children, even when their own health suffered. This pattern of maternal sacrifice and devotion wasn't unique to the Payer families. Similar evidence appears in Neanderthal sites across Europe and Asia, suggesting that extended, nurturing nursing was a species-wide characteristic. From the caves of Spain to the steppes of Siberia, Neanderthal mothers were making the same commitment to their children's early development. The implications extend beyond individual families to our understanding of Neanderthal society as a whole. A species that invested so heavily in early childhood care was one that valued its children not just as future adults, but as individuals worthy of significant resources and attention. This challenges stereotypes of Neanderthals as harsh, survival-focused beings and reveals them as deeply nurturing parents whose approach to early childcare rivaled our own. As we'll explore in coming chapters, this foundation of maternal devotion during the nursing years set the stage for the complex, caring relationships that characterized Neanderthal childhood throughout their development. The love and attention lavished on nursing infants created secure, confident children who could face the challenges of their Ice Age world with the emotional strength that only comes from knowing you are deeply loved. Chapter 3. Learning through play. High in the Pyrenees Mountains, a group of Neanderthal children gather around the cave mouth as their mothers prepare the evening meal. 7-year-old hands grasp small wooden spears, practicing the motions their fathers demonstrated that morning. Laughter echoes off the stone walls as they compete to see who can hit a pile of mammoth bones with the most accuracy. What looks like simple play is actually sophisticated education in survival skills. Dr. Penny Spikins has spent her career challenging the traditional view of Neanderthal childhood as universally harsh and brief. Her research reveals that Neanderthal children, like those of all intelligent species, learn through play, but their approach to childhood education was uniquely adapted to their challenging environment and close-knit social groups. The archaeological record preserves tantalizing glimpses of Neanderthal children at play. At sites across Europe, researchers have found small stone tools clearly made by inexperienced hands, the products of children learning to nap flint under adult guidance. These aren't failed attempts at useful tools, but deliberate practice pieces that show children were encouraged to experiment and learn through trial and error. The size and craftsmanship of these miniature tools tell their own story. Made to fit small hands, they demonstrate that adults took time to create appropriate learning materials for their children. The gradual improvement in technique visible across multiple tools from the same site suggests sustained teaching relationships where children received ongoing instruction and encouragement from patient adult mentors. But toolmaking was just one aspect of Neanderthal childhood education. Evidence from multiple sites suggests children spent significant time observing and participating in all aspects of adult life. Unlike modern human societies where children are often segregated into age-specific groups, Neanderthal children appear to have been integrated into the full range of community activities from an early age. This integration created unique learning opportunities. Neanderthal children would have watched their parents process animal hides, maintain fires, and gather plant foods. They would have observed the complex social negotiations that determined when to move camp, where to hunt, and how to deal with conflicts. This constant exposure to adult activities provided rich educational experiences that no formal schooling could match. The small size of Neanderthal groups, typically 10 to 20 individuals, meant that children received intensive, personalized attention from multiple adults. Rather than competing for adult attention in large groups, each child would have had access to several knowledgeable teachers willing to share their expertise. This intimate learning environment fostered close relationships and allowed for customized instruction adapted to each child's interests and abilities. Archaeological evidence suggests that Neanderthal children began participating in food-gathering activities from a surprisingly early age. Sites contain small baskets and carrying tools sized for children, indicating they were expected to contribute to family survival while developing essential skills. But this wasn't exploitation. It was education through meaningful participation in community life. The nature of Neanderthal play reflects their society's focus on close social relationships. While modern human children often engage in competitive games that establish hierarchies, Neanderthal play appears to have emphasized cooperation and mutual support. Children learn to work together to solve problems, share resources, and support group members who were struggling. This cooperative emphasis extended to how children learned hunting skills. Evidence from multiple sites suggests that young Neanderthals practiced hunting in groups, learning not just individual techniques, but the complex coordination required for successful large-game hunting. They would have learned to read animal behavior, coordinate with other hunters, and adapt to changing circumstances skills that require both physical ability and sophisticated social intelligence. The harsh Ice Age environment provided its own educational opportunities. Neanderthal children learned to read weather patterns, identify safe shelter, and recognize the subtle signs that indicated the presence of dangerous predators. These weren't abstract lessons, but vital survival skills practiced daily through exploration and play under adult supervision. Seasonal changes created different learning experiences throughout the year. Summer allowed for exploration of wider territories and encounters with different plant and animal species. Winter confined families to caves and rock shelters, creating opportunities for intensive tool-making instruction and storytelling around the fire. Each season brought its own curriculum of essential knowledge. The development of language skills in Neanderthal children likely followed patterns similar to modern humans, with rich vocabulary development occurring through constant interaction with adults. The complexity of their tool-making and hunting strategies suggests sophisticated communication, abilities that would have required extensive childhood learning. Children would have absorbed not just words, but the complex cultural knowledge embedded in their language. Evidence of symbolic behavior in Neanderthal sites, including personal ornaments and possible artistic expression, suggests that children also learned about abstract concepts and cultural meanings. They would have discovered which objects held special significance, how to create personal decorations, and the social rules governing their use. These cultural lessons were as important as practical skills for full integration into Neanderthal society. The role of grandparents and other elderly relatives in childhood education appears to have been particularly significant. Dental evidence shows that some Neanderthals lived to relatively advanced ages despite the harsh environment, suggesting their knowledge and experience were valued by the group. These elders would have been repositories of cultural knowledge and skilled teachers for the youngest generation. Physical development in Neanderthal children occurred more rapidly than in modern humans, with dental evidence suggesting they reached physical maturity earlier. However, this accelerated development didn't diminish the importance of childhood learning. If anything, it may have intensified the educational process, requiring children to absorb complex knowledge in a compressed time frame. The integration of practical skills with emotional development characterizes Neanderthal childhood education. Children learn not just how to make tools or track animals, but how to form the social bonds that held their communities together. Play activities that developed hunting skills also strengthened friendships and established the trust. Relationships essential for group survival. Archaeological evidence of children's involvement in burial practices suggests they also learned about death, grief, and community support from an early age. Several Neanderthal burial sites contain evidence that children participated in funeral ceremonies, learning about the spiritual and emotional aspects of their culture alongside practical skills. The absence of age-segregated learning environments meant that Neanderthal children benefited from exposure to peers at all developmental stages. Older children served as teachers and role models for younger ones, while also continuing their own learning through interaction with adults. This multi-age learning environment fostered both teaching skills and advanced learning opportunities. The evidence suggests that individual differences in learning styles and abilities were accommodated within Neanderthal education. Children who showed particular aptitude for toolmaking might receive extra instruction in that area, while those with keen observational skills might be encouraged to develop tracking abilities. This personalized approach maximized each child's potential contributions to group survival. Games and play activities that developed specific cognitive abilities appear throughout the archaeological record. Counting games using small stones, pattern recognition activities with natural objects, and memory challenges based on resource locations all contributed to intellectual development while remaining engaging for young minds. The deep integration between play and learning in Neanderthal childhood created a seamless educational experience where children absorbed essential knowledge while enjoying themselves. This approach required significant adult investment of time and attention, but it produced children who were not only skilled in survival techniques, but also emotionally bonded to their communities and committed to their preservation. As we'll explore in the next chapter, this foundation of integrated learning through play created children who were remarkably resilient in the face of the challenges that defined Neanderthal life. The education they received prepared them not just to survive, but to thrive in one of the most challenging environments humans have ever inhabited. Chapter 4. Living with Hardship. The autumn morning dawns cold and gray over the Spanish plateau as 8-year-old Ketu feels the familiar ache in his healing arm. 6 months ago, a mammoth's tusk had snapped his forearm during a hunting accident and injury that would have spelled death for a child left to fend for himself. But Ketu wasn't abandoned. His fracture healed cleanly, his arm regained its strength, and today he's ready to rejoin the hunt. His survival tells a remarkable story about how Neanderthal families faced hardship together. Dr. Eric Trinkas of Washington University has made a career of studying Neanderthal bones, and what he's discovered challenges every assumption about these ancient people's supposed brutality. Far from abandoning injured family members, Neanderthals cared for sick and injured children with a devotion that often lasted years. The fossil record preserves dozens of examples of children who survived devastating injuries only because their families provided continuous, loving care. The extent of injuries suffered by Neanderthal children is staggering. They show fracture patterns similar to modern rodeo professionals, evidence of close contact with large, dangerous animals during hunting activities. Broken arms from mammoth encounters, skull fractures from cave bear attacks, and crushing injuries from oryx hooves all appear in the archaeological record. Yet most of these injuries healed well, showing minimal infection and proper bone alignment that can only result from careful medical attention. This pattern of injury and recovery reveals something profound about Neanderthal family values. In a subsistence lifestyle, where every individual's contribution could mean the difference between survival and starvation, caring for injured children represented an enormous sacrifice. Injured children couldn't contribute to food gathering or toolmaking. They required constant attention, extra food, and protection from predators. Yet Neanderthal families made these sacrifices repeatedly and willingly. The case of a Neanderthal child, known as C-146-700 from Spain's Cova Negra site, exemplifies this commitment to disabled family members. This child suffered from congenital conditions that may have included Down syndrome, causing severe developmental delays and physical disabilities. Modern medical analysis suggests the child would have required constant care and could never have contributed significantly to group survival in traditional ways. Yet this child lived to at least 6 years of age, showing clear evidence of devoted family care throughout their short life. The survival of C-146-700 challenges fundamental assumptions about prehistoric societies. This wasn't a case of briefly caring for a child who might recover and contribute to group survival. This was a family choosing to devote precious resources to a child who would always require support, simply because they loved that child and valued their life. The decision speaks to emotional bonds that transcended mere survival calculations. Evidence of caring for sick children appears throughout the Neanderthal archaeological record. At Shatter Cave in Iraq, researchers found the remains of a Neanderthal child who had suffered severe head injuries but lived for months afterward. The healing patterns in the skull bones show that someone cleaned and dressed the wounds regularly, prevented infection, and provided the nutrition necessary for recovery. This level of medical care required sophisticated knowledge and unwavering commitment. The development of Neanderthal children in harsh environments created remarkable resilience. Those who survived to adulthood had endured challenges that would overwhelm most modern children: extreme cold, food scarcity, predator threats, and frequent injuries. This harsh upbringing produced individuals with extraordinary physical and emotional toughness, but it came at a cost. Childhood mortality rates were high, and the constant stress of survival left permanent marks on those who endured. Dental evidence reveals the cyclical nature of hardship in Neanderthal children's lives. Stress lines in their tooth enamel mark periods of illness, malnutrition, or extreme environmental challenges. These lines cluster around winter months, showing how seasonal food shortages and cold temperatures affected children's health year after year. Yet the fact that these children survived to develop adult teeth demonstrates their family's success in protecting them through repeated crises. The lead exposure discovered in French Neanderthal children adds another dimension to their story of hardship. These children were contaminated by lead from nearby mines, suffering neurological damage that would have affected their development and behavior. Yet their families continued to care for them despite their disabilities, providing the support necessary for survival in an already challenging environment. Nutritional stress appears frequently in Neanderthal children's remains, but it's often accompanied by evidence of preferential feeding. When food was scarce, adults appear to have redirected resources to children, sometimes at the cost of their own health. Isotopic analysis of bone chemistry shows that children often received higher quality protein than adults during lean periods, suggesting that families prioritized children's nutritional needs even when resources were critically limited. The social response to childhood hardship reveals the strength of Neanderthal community bonds. When a child was injured or ill, the entire group appears to have adjusted their activities to accommodate care needs. Sites show evidence of extended stays in locations that would have provided better resources for recovery, suggesting that hunting schedules and migration patterns were modified to support sick children. Training children for survival began early and was integrated into daily life. Young Neanderthals learned to recognize dangers, respond to threats, and recover from setbacks through direct experience under adult supervision. This experiential learning created children who were remarkably capable of handling crises independently, but it also exposed them to risks that modern parents would consider unacceptable. The psychological impact of growing up in such a challenging environment shaped Neanderthal children's worldview and emotional development. They learned to expect hardship, to rely on family support during crises, and to contribute to others' care when they were able. This created individuals with strong social bonds, but also realistic expectations about life's difficulties. Archaeological evidence suggests that Neanderthal children who survived serious injuries often received special status within their groups. Their survival demonstrated both their own resilience and their family's devotion, marking them as individuals who had proven their worth through overcoming adversity. This recognition may have provided psychological benefits that supported continued recovery and integration. The development of pain tolerance and emotional resilience in Neanderthal children was remarkable. Bone evidence shows that many children suffered multiple serious injuries throughout their development, yet continued to participate in group activities and contribute to family survival. This physical and emotional toughness was both a survival necessity and a cultural value that shaped their approach to raising their own children. Seasonal patterns of hardship created predictable challenges that families learned to anticipate and prepare for. Winter brought cold, hunger, and confinement to caves with limited resources. Spring offered renewal, but also dangerous river crossings and unstable weather. Summer provided abundance, but also the need for constant movement following animal migrations. Each season brought its own threats and opportunities for learning. The role of ritual and ceremony in helping children cope with hardship appears in several archaeological contexts. Evidence of special burial practices for children who died young suggests that families developed cultural mechanisms for processing grief and honoring short lives. These rituals would have provided psychological support for surviving children who witnessed the deaths of siblings and friends. The cumulative effect of growing up under such challenging conditions created Neanderthal adults with extraordinary capabilities, but also significant vulnerabilities. They were physically tough, emotionally resilient, and deeply bonded to their families, but they also carried the accumulated stress of childhood hardships that may have affected their health and longevity. Understanding how Neanderthal families faced hardship together reveals the deep roots of human compassion and sacrifice. These weren't primitive beings driven only by survival instincts, but loving parents who made extraordinary sacrifices to protect their children. Their approach to childhood hardship demonstrates that the bonds between parents and children are among the most powerful forces in human evolution, capable of overcoming seemingly impossible challenges through love, determination, and mutual support. As we'll see in the next chapter, this foundation of family resilience created the emotional security that allowed Neanderthal children to develop the complex social skills necessary for survival in their demanding world. Chapter 5. The Village That Raised a Child. In the limestone caves of Croatia's Krapina site, archaeological evidence tells the story of a community where every adult was invested in every child's welfare. Stone tools bearing the fingerprints of multiple hands, communal hearths arranged for shared meals, and sleeping areas designed to protect the youngest members reveal a society where childcare was everyone's responsibility. This wasn't just a family unit. It was a village dedicated to raising the next generation together. The small size of Neanderthal groups, typically 10 to 20 individuals across multiple generations, created unique opportunities for intensive childcare that larger societies couldn't match. Every child knew every adult intimately, and every adult had a vested interest in every child's development. This created a support network that modern families, isolated in nuclear units, can barely imagine. Dr. Clive Finlayson of the Gibraltar National Museum has studied Neanderthal social organization for decades, focusing on how these small groups managed to survive in challenging environments through cooperative childcare. His research reveals that Neanderthal children benefited from what anthropologists call alloprenting, care provided by individuals other than biological parents. This shared responsibility for child rearing allowed for specialized knowledge transfer and reduced the burden on individual parents. The archaeological evidence shows that Neanderthal caves were organized with children's needs in mind. Special alcoves provided safe sleeping areas for young ones, positioned away from cave entrances where cold drafts and predators posed threats. Communal hearths were arranged that children could benefit from warmth and light while remaining protected from accidentally falling into fires. These layouts required community planning and cooperation that put children's welfare at the center of domestic organization. Toolmaking instruction provides perhaps the clearest evidence of community involvement in child education. At sites across Europe, researchers find evidence that multiple adults taught toolmaking skills to children. Different knapping techniques visible in practice tools suggest that children learn from several teachers, each contributing their specialized knowledge. This diversified education gave children access to the full range of technological skills possessed by their community. The presence of elderly Neanderthals in many group sites reveals another crucial aspect of community childcare. Grandparents and great-aunts who were no longer capable of hunting or heavy labor found new purpose as teachers and caregivers for the youngest generation. These elders possessed decades of accumulated knowledge about survival techniques, resource locations, and cultural traditions that they could pass on through intensive interaction with children. Seasonal challenges that would have overwhelmed individual families were manageable for communities that shared childcare responsibilities. When mothers were giving birth or recovering from illness, other community members stepped in to provide care for existing children. When hunting expeditions required the strongest adults to travel far from base camps, remaining community members formed childcare cooperatives that ensured safety and education continued. The division of labor in Neanderthal communities appears to have been more flexible than in later human societies, with childcare being a shared responsibility rather than primarily a female duty. Men who were injured and couldn't hunt participated in child supervision and education. Postmenopausal women became dedicated childcare specialists. Even adolescents took responsibility for younger children, creating hierarchical learning relationships that benefited all involved. Evidence of shared meals and communal food preparation reveals another aspect of community child rearing. Archaeological remains show that food was processed and cooked at central hearths, where children could observe and participate in meal preparation. This created daily opportunities for education about nutrition, cooking techniques, and food safety while ensuring that children received adequate nutrition even when their parents were absent or occupied with other tasks. The development of language and communication skills in Neanderthal children benefited enormously from community involvement. Exposure to multiple adult speakers provided rich linguistic input that accelerated vocabulary development and communication skills. Children heard different speaking styles, regional variations, and specialized vocabularies related to hunting, toolmaking, and plant gathering that they might not have encountered in isolated nuclear families. Cultural transmission of knowledge was enhanced by community participation in child rearing. Essential survival skills like firemaking, weather prediction, and danger recognition were taught by multiple adults, ensuring that critical knowledge was preserved even if individual teachers were lost to accident or illness. This redundancy in education created more resilient cultural traditions that could survive demographic challenges. The emotional benefits of community childcare were substantial. Children who lost parents to hunting accidents or illness weren't left orphaned, but were absorbed into the broader community network. Multiple attachment relationships provided emotional security and reduced the trauma of individual losses. Children grew up feeling valued not just by their parents, but by their entire community. Conflict resolution and social skills were learned through observation of adult interactions within the close-knit community. Children witnessed how disputes were settled, how resources were shared during scarcity, and how community decisions were made. This constant exposure to social dynamics provided sophisticated education in the interpersonal skills necessary for group survival. The specialization possible in small communities allowed some adults to focus their attention on children with particular talents or needs. A child who showed exceptional skill in tracking might receive intensive instruction from the community's best hunter. A child with physical disabilities might work closely with an elder who had successfully adapted to similar limitations. This individualized attention maximized each child's potential while accommodating their unique characteristics. Archaeological evidence of children's participation in burial ceremonies reveals their integration into the community as spiritual and emotional life. Children who helped prepare bodies for burial, participated in grave goods placement, and witnessed funeral ceremonies learned about death, grief, and cultural values from their earliest years. This participation strengthened their bonds to community traditions and prepared them for their own future leadership roles. The protection of children during community conflicts or migrations demonstrates the priority placed on their welfare. Archaeological evidence suggests that when groups moved to new territories or faced threats from other Neanderthal groups, children were placed in the safest positions and given the best protection available. The entire community organized around ensuring children's survival during dangerous transitions. Seasonal gatherings with other Neanderthal groups provided opportunities for children to interact with peers from different communities, expanding their social networks and learning about variations in cultural practices. These interactions were crucial for genetic diversity when children eventually formed their own families. But they also provided educational opportunities as children learned different techniques and traditions from visiting groups. The investment in community childcare created strong bonds that lasted throughout individuals' lives. Children who grew up being cared for by multiple adults developed loyalty not just to their biological families, but to the entire community. This created social cohesion that helped groups survive the challenges of Ice Age life and resist the temptation to abandon members during difficult periods. The evidence suggests that Neanderthal communities developed sophisticated systems for monitoring children's development and intervening when problems arose. Multiple caregivers meant that developmental delays, behavioral issues, or health problems were quickly identified and addressed. This early intervention system may have been crucial for helping children with disabilities or learning differences reach their potential. The legacy of community childcare appears in the archaeological record through evidence of cultural continuity across generations. Tool-making traditions, burial practices, and settlement patterns show remarkable consistency within regional groups, suggesting successful transmission of cultural knowledge from community elders to children. This cultural stability provided the foundation for Neanderthal survival across hundreds of thousands of years. Understanding how Neanderthal communities raised their children together reveals the deep evolutionary roots of cooperative parenting. These small, close-knit groups created an environment where every child was treasured, protected, and educated by the entire community. This approach to childcare required significant sacrifice from adults, but produced children who were not only well prepared for survival, but also deeply committed to maintaining the social bonds that made their communities possible. Chapter 6. The Rituals of Growing Up Deep Within Shatter Cave in the Mountains of Iraq. Archaeologists discovered something that forever changed our understanding of Neanderthal spirituality. Surrounding the carefully positioned remains of a Neanderthal man were traces of flower, pollen yarrow, centauri, ragwort, grape hyacinth, joint pine, and hollyhock. While skeptics suggested the flowers arrived through natural means, the intentional arrangement of the burial and the medicinal properties of the plants point to something more profound. Neanderthals had developed rituals around death that included children in their most sacred ceremonies. Dr. Ralph Saletsky, who led the Shanadar excavations, recognized that this flower burial represented evidence of symbolic behavior that challenged every assumption about Neanderthal cognitive abilities. But perhaps more importantly for understanding childhood, The burial sites throughout the Neanderthal world revealed that children played special roles in these communities' spiritual lives. The archaeological record shows that Neanderthal children received particularly elaborate burial treatment, often more complex than that given to adults. At sites across Europe and the Middle East, child graves contain the highest concentrations of grave goods, carefully crafted tools, animal bones, and personal ornaments that suggest these young individuals held special significance in their community's spiritual worldview. La Farassy Cave in France provides remarkable evidence of the ritual importance of Neanderthal children. The site contains multiple burials spanning thousands of years, but the children's graves stand out for their careful construction and rich grave goods. A 6-year-old child was buried with a carefully arranged collection of stone tools, suggesting that even young children were seen as possessing spiritual essence that deserved ceremonial recognition. The discovery of possible Neanderthal art at sites like Cueva de los Aviones in Spain adds another dimension to understanding childhood rituals. Perforated shells covered with pigments suggest body decoration or ceremonial dress. While we can't be certain these objects were used in childhood ceremonies, their presence in sites with evidence of children suggests that young Neanderthals may have participated in ritual body painting or decoration as part of their spiritual education. Archaeological evidence from multiple sites suggests that Neanderthal children participated in burial ceremonies from an early age. Child-sized handprints appear near burial sites, and evidence of small hands participating in grave construction appears in several locations. This participation would have provided profound education about death, community values, and spiritual beliefs while integrating children into their culture's most sacred practices. The timing of certain burial practices suggests that Neanderthals may have developed coming-of-age ceremonies for adolescents. Several sites contain evidence of special treatment for individuals in their early teens ages, when modern hunter-gatherer societies typically conduct initiation ceremonies. While the specific nature of these practices remains unclear, the archaeological evidence points to formal recognition of the transition from childhood to adulthood. The creation of personal ornaments by Neanderthal children reveals another aspect of their spiritual development. At sites like Grotte du Rhin in France, archaeologists have found pierced animal teeth and worked ivory that appear to have been made by inexperienced hands. These objects weren't just decorative. They likely held spiritual significance and marked important transitions in children's lives. Evidence of children's involvement in the creation of ochre pigments appears at several Neanderthal sites. Young hands helped grind mineral pigments that were used for body decoration, cave marking, and possibly burial ceremonies. This participation in pigment preparation suggests that children were taught about the spiritual significance of colors and their use in ritual contexts from an early age. The arrangement of living spaces in Neanderthal caves often includes areas that appear dedicated to ceremonial activities involving children. Special alcoves with evidence of ritual fires, careful arrangement of symbolic objects, and child-sized seating areas suggest that families created sacred spaces where children could participate in spiritual practices and learn about their community's beliefs. Seasonal ceremonies appear to have played important roles in Neanderthal children's spiritual education. Archaeological evidence suggests that certain ritual activities were timed to coincide with solstices, animal migrations, or other natural cycles. Children who participated in these ceremonies would have learned about their community's relationship with the natural world and their place within cosmic cycles. The discovery of modified animal skulls and bones at Neanderthal sites suggests possible totem or spiritual animal practices that may have included children. Evidence of careful preservation and arrangement of certain animal remains, particularly cave bear skulls, points to spiritual beliefs that children would have learned through observation and participation in ritual activities. Musical instruments potentially created by Neanderthals including the controversial Divya babe flute from Slovenia, suggest that children may have participated in ceremonial music and dance. While debate continues about whether this bone artifact is truly a musical instrument, its presence in a Neanderthal context raises intriguing possibilities about childhood participation in musical rituals. The evidence of children's involvement in symbolic behaviors extends to their daily lives through personal decoration and body modification. Some Neanderthal children show evidence of intentional tooth modification or scarification that suggests participation in identity-marking practices. These modifications would have marked important transitions in their social and spiritual development. Archaeological patterns suggest that Neanderthal families may have created special ceremonies to mark children as first successful participation in adult activities. Evidence of miniature tools placed in ritual contexts, small hunting implements in ceremonial deposits, and child-sized objects in special cave locations all point to formal recognition of children's developing capabilities. The integration of children into Neanderthal spiritual life appears to have been comprehensive rather than restricted to specific age groups. Evidence suggests that even very young children were present during burial ceremonies, spiritual gatherings, and seasonal rituals. This early and continuous exposure to sacred practices would have provided deep enculturation into their community as spiritual worldview. The development of symbolic thinking in Neanderthal children appears to have been supported by regular participation in ritual activities. The cognitive demands of understanding symbolic meanings, participating in ceremonial behaviors, and learning about abstract spiritual concepts would have stimulated intellectual development while strengthening cultural bonds. The evidence for Neanderthal children's spiritual lives challenges assumptions about the cognitive capabilities of these ancient people. Their participation in complex ritual behaviors, creation of symbolic objects, and integration into ceremonial practices reveal sophisticated spiritual and cultural development that parallels modern human capabilities. The legacy of Neanderthal children as spiritual education appears in the remarkable cultural continuity visible across hundreds of thousands of years of their existence. Burial practices, symbolic behaviors, and ritual patterns show consistency across time and space that could only result from successful transmission of spiritual knowledge from adults to children across countless generations. Understanding the ritual dimensions of Neanderthal childhood reveals communities that valued their children not just as future adults, but as spiritual beings deserving of ceremonial recognition and sacred education. These practices created children who were deeply connected to their cultural traditions and committed to preserving the spiritual heritage that gave meaning to their challenging lives. Chapter 7. When children became teachers. In the depths of Bruniquel Cave in southern France, something extraordinary happened 176,000 years ago that wouldn't be discovered until 2016. Deep within the cave system, far from any natural light, Neanderthals had constructed mysterious circular structures from broken stalagmites. The precision of these constructions, the planning required to work in total darkness, and the sophisticated understanding of cave systems they represent suggest knowledge transmission so complex that it could only have been achieved through generations of patient teaching from adults to children. Dr. Jacques Jaubert of the University of Bordeaux, who led the Bruniquel excavations, recognized that these structures represented some of the earliest evidence of complex human behavior in deep cave environments. But the implications for understanding Neanderthal childhood are equally profound. The knowledge required to navigate dangerous cave systems, work in darkness, and construct sophisticated structures would have taken generations to develop and could only have been preserved through careful teaching from experienced adults to eager young learners. The transmission of complex knowledge from one generation to the next represents one of humanity's greatest achievements. And new evidence suggests that Neanderthals were pioneers in this fundamental human behavior. Archaeological sites across Europe reveal that Neanderthal children weren't just passive recipients of adult knowledge. They became active teachers themselves, creating innovative solutions that were then adopted by their communities. At the El Cedrón cave site in Spain, researchers discovered evidence of sophisticated food processing techniques that appeared to have been developed by young Neanderthals experimenting with traditional methods. Chemical analysis of tools used by individuals of different ages reveals that children and adolescents were modifying inherited techniques to improve efficiency. These innovations were then adopted by adults, creating a two-way flow of knowledge that enriched the entire community's survival capabilities. The development of regional tool-making traditions provides compelling evidence of knowledge transmission between generations. At sites like Krapina in Croatia, archaeologists can trace the evolution of stone tool techniques across thousands of years. The gradual refinement of knapping methods, the introduction of new tool types, and the persistence of successful innovations all point to continuous teaching relationships between experienced craftspeople and young apprentices. Evidence from multiple sites suggests that Neanderthal children began learning complex skills remarkably early. Tiny handprints on cave walls at sites like Cueva de las Manos in Spain demonstrate that children as young as 5 were participating in symbolic activities that required sophisticated hand-eye coordination and cultural knowledge. These early participants would later become the teachers who passed these skills to the next generation. The archaeological record reveals that different children specialized in learning different aspects of their community's knowledge base. Some focused intensively on toolmaking, developing exceptional skills in flint knapping and bone working. Others became experts in plant knowledge, learning to identify hundreds of edible and medicinal species. Still others specialized in animal behavior, developing the tracking and hunting skills essential for group survival. This early specialization created a community of young experts who could teach specific skills to their peers and even to adults. Archaeological evidence suggests that when Neanderthal groups encountered new challenges, such as climate changes that altered available resources, it was often the young specialists who developed innovative solutions that enabled group survival. The persistence of cultural traditions across vast spans of time demonstrates the effectiveness of Neanderthal knowledge transmission systems. Burial practices that remain consistent for hundreds of thousands of years, tool-making techniques that spread across continents, and survival strategies that enabled life in diverse environments all point to successful teaching relationships that preserved essential knowledge across countless generations. Evidence of children's role in knowledge innovation appears in the archaeological record through modified tools and experimental techniques. Young Neanderthals appear to have been encouraged to experiment with traditional methods, leading to improvements in hunting techniques, food processing, and tool efficiency. The adoption of these innovations by adults shows that Neanderthal communities valued young people as contributions to cultural development. The development of language skills in Neanderthal children was crucial for knowledge transmission. Recent analysis of Neanderthal vocal anatomy suggests they possessed sophisticated communication abilities comparable to modern humans. Children would have learned not just vocabulary, but the complex cultural knowledge embedded in their language stories about resource locations, hunting strategies, and survival techniques that couldn't be demonstrated but had to be spoken. Archaeological evidence suggests that Neanderthal children participated in long-distance knowledge exchange between different groups. Evidence of tool-making techniques and cultural practices spreading across vast distances indicates that young people served as cultural ambassadors when groups encountered each other. Their ability to quickly learn and adapt new techniques made them valuable conduits for innovation across Neanderthal populations. The role of play in knowledge transmission becomes evident through archaeological evidence of children's practice activities. Sites contain numerous examples of miniature tools, practice hunting implements, and experimental techniques that show children learning through guided play. This approach to education made learning enjoyable while ensuring thorough mastery of essential skills. Evidence of storytelling and oral tradition preservation appears indirectly through the consistency of cultural practices across time and space. The preservation of complex knowledge about resource locations, seasonal patterns, and survival techniques could only have been achieved through verbal instruction supplemented by practical demonstration. Children who learned these oral traditions became the storytellers who preserved cultural memory for future generations. The integration of multiple learning modalities in Neanderthal education created robust knowledge transmission systems. Children learned through observation, imitation, experimentation, and verbal instruction, creating multiple pathways for knowledge preservation. This redundancy ensured that essential information survived, even when individual teachers were lost to accident or illness. The development of teaching skills in Neanderthal children appears to have been as important as learning skills. Evidence suggests that young people were expected to share their knowledge with peers and younger children, creating a culture of teaching that strengthened community bonds while ensuring knowledge preservation. This expectation of knowledge sharing created children who were not just learners, but active contributors to their community's intellectual development. The adaptation of knowledge transmission methods to individual learning styles appears in the archaeological record through evidence of different teaching approaches. Some children learn best through hands-on experimentation, others through careful observation, and still others through verbal instruction. Neanderthal communities appear to have accommodated these different learning preferences while ensuring all children mastered essential survival skills. The evidence of children's contributions to technological innovation challenges traditional views of prehistoric societies as rigidly conservative. Young Neanderthals appear to have been encouraged to question existing methods, experiment with new approaches, and contribute their ideas to community problem-solving. This openness to innovation from young people may have been crucial for Neanderthal survival in changing environments. The development of memory techniques in Neanderthal children was essential for preserving the vast body of knowledge required for survival. Archaeological evidence suggests that children learned complex mnemonic systems for remembering resource locations, seasonal patterns, and cultural information. These memory skills enabled them to become walking libraries of survival knowledge. Understanding how Neanderthal children became teachers reveals communities that valued learning, innovation, and knowledge sharing across generations. These weren't societies that simply transmitted fixed traditions, but dynamic communities, where young people contributed to cultural development while ensuring the preservation of essential knowledge. This approach to education created children who were not just prepared for survival, but committed to improving their communities' capabilities for future generations. Chapter 8. The Price of Love. In the freezing winter of 52,000 years ago, a Neanderthal mother in the Rhone Valley of France faced an impossible choice. Her 5-year-old son was weakening from repeated illness, his small body unable to fight off the infections that plagued their cave community. Food was scarce, fuel for fires was running low, and the healthy members of the group needed every calorie to survive until spring. In most ancient societies, this child would have been abandoned. Instead, she pulled him closer to the fire and gave him her portion of meat. Dr. Laura Limmer of the University of Tübingen has spent years reading the microscopic stories written in ancient teeth, and what she discovered about Neanderthal childhood stress revolutionized our understanding of how these families balanced love with survival. Her analysis of dental enamel from 74 Neanderthal children revealed horizontal grooves and defects that mark periods of severe stress illness, malnutrition, trauma, and environmental hardship that would have killed children without intensive parental care. The pattern of stress lines in Neanderthal children's teeth tells a remarkable story of family devotion under impossible circumstances. Unlike modern human children, whose stress markers peak during weaning and then decline, Neanderthal children show increasing stress throughout their early years. This suggests that while their families protected them during the most vulnerable nursing period, the challenges of Ice Age life became more severe as children grew older and required different kinds of support. The dental evidence reveals that Neanderthal children experienced stress levels that would be considered extreme by modern standards. Repeated illness, nutritional deficiencies, and physical trauma created permanent markers in their developing teeth that scientists can read like a medical record written in enamel. Yet the fact that these children survived to develop adult teeth demonstrates their families' remarkable success in providing care under the harshest possible conditions. The timing of stress episodes in Neanderthal children coincides with the most challenging periods of Ice Age life. Winter months, when food was scarce and cold temperatures increased caloric needs, show up as periods of severe nutritional stress in children's teeth. Yet even during these crisis periods, evidence suggests that parents redirected resources to their children, sometimes at the cost of their own health and survival. The discovery of lead poisoning in Neanderthal children from France adds another dimension to our understanding of childhood stress in these communities. The children showed evidence of repeated lead exposure during their development, likely from contaminated water sources near ancient mining sites. The neurological effects of lead poisoning would have created additional challenges for families already struggling with environmental hardships. Yet these children received the care necessary for survival despite their disabilities. Archaeological evidence suggests that Neanderthal families developed sophisticated strategies for managing childhood stress and trauma. Special sleeping areas were created to protect children from cold drafts. Communal hearths were arranged to provide maximum warmth for young bodies, and food storage systems ensured that children received nutrition even when hunting was unsuccessful. These adaptations required significant energy and resources, but were consistently implemented across Neanderthal sites. The comparison between Neanderthal and early modern human children reveals important differences in how families manage stress and development. Early modern human children show more stress during weaning, but less stress during later childhood, suggesting that their families were better at protecting older children from environmental hardships. This difference may reflect improved resource management, larger social support networks, or more efficient survival strategies among modern human groups. The psychological impact of growing up under constant stress shaped Neanderthal children's emotional development in profound ways. Children who survived multiple crisis periods would have developed extraordinary resilience, but also realistic expectations about life as difficulties. This combination of toughness and family loyalty created adults who were capable of extreme sacrifice for their children, but who also understood the harsh realities of survival decisions. Evidence of preferential feeding during stress periods appears throughout the Neanderthal archaeological record. Isotopic analysis of bone chemistry shows that children often received higher quality protein than adults during lean periods, indicating that parents consistently prioritized their children's nutritional needs. This pattern of sacrifice appears even when adult health was severely compromised, demonstrating the depth of parental commitment in Neanderthal families. The development of stress management techniques in Neanderthal children appears to have been crucial for survival. Archaeological evidence suggests that children learned to cope with pain, hunger, and fear through observation of adult behaviors and participation in family coping strategies. This early education in stress management created children who could function effectively even under extreme duress. The role of community support in managing childhood stress becomes evident through evidence of shared childcare during crisis periods. When individual families were overwhelmed by children's needs, community members appear to have stepped in to provide additional care. This social safety net meant that childhood stress didn't result in abandonment but instead triggered increased community investment in children as survival. The physical consequences of childhood stress in Neanderthal populations were severe but didn't necessarily impact survival. Children who experienced multiple stress episodes often showed stunted growth, dental problems, and evidence of chronic illness. Yet many survived to adulthood and successful reproduction. This demonstrates both the severity of their environment and the effectiveness of family care in enabling survival despite significant health challenges. The seasonal patterns of stress in Neanderthal children revealed the cyclical nature of their challenges. Spring brought relief from winter hardships, but also new stresses associated with migration, river crossings, and adaptation to new environments. Summer provided abundance, but required constant movement following animal migrations. Fall brought preparation stress as families worked to gather resources for winter survival. Each season created its own pattern of childhood stress that families learned to anticipate and manage. The evidence suggests that Neanderthal families developed early warning systems for recognizing and responding to childhood stress. Changes in behavior, appetite, or energy levels would have been quickly identified by attentive parents and caregivers. This early intervention may have been crucial for preventing minor stress from becoming a life-threatening crisis. The long-term effects of childhood stress on adult Neanderthals appear in the archaeological record through evidence of compromised health and shortened lifespans. Adults who had experienced severe childhood stress often showed evidence of chronic health problems, reduced immune function, and accelerated aging. Yet these same individuals often became devoted parents who were determined to protect their own children from similar hardships. The development of pain tolerance in Neanderthal children was remarkable and necessary for survival. Evidence of healed fractures, dental problems, and other injuries suggests that children learned to function effectively despite significant discomfort. This pain tolerance was both a survival skill and a family value that enabled children to contribute to group activities even when injured or ill. The emotional bonds forged through shared hardship appear to have been particularly strong in Neanderthal families. Children who were cared for through multiple crisis periods developed deep loyalty to their families and communities. This emotional foundation created adults who were willing to make extraordinary sacrifices for their own children, perpetuating cycles of devoted care across generations. The evidence of children surviving extreme stress challenges assumptions about prehistoric childhood as inevitably harsh and short. While Neanderthal children certainly faced severe challenges, their survival rates during stress periods were remarkably high compared to what would be expected without intensive parental care. This suggests that Neanderthal families were extraordinarily effective at protecting their children even under the most difficult circumstances. Understanding the price of love in Neanderthal families reveals the true depth of their emotional bonds and parental commitment. These weren't decisions made from abundance, but choices to sacrifice everything for children as survival when resources were critically limited. The stress experienced by Neanderthal children was real and severe, but it was matched by family love and community support that enabled survival against overwhelming odds. The legacy of this devoted care appears in the archaeological record through evidence of cultural continuity and population persistence across hundreds of thousands of years. Despite facing environmental challenges that would have destroyed less caring societies, Neanderthal families successfully raised children who carried forward their cultural traditions and survival knowledge. The price they paid was enormous, but their love proved stronger than the harsh realities of Ice Age existence. Chapter 9. The Great Weaning. Day Morning mist rises from the cave entrance as 3-year-old Naya takes her first tentative bite of mammoth meat, without her mother's milk to wash it down. For 30 months, her mother's breast has been her primary source of nutrition, comfort, and security. Now, as the spring hunting season begins, it's time for one of childhood's most crucial transitions. The weaning process that follows will determine not only Naya's physical survival, but her emotional development and her place within the family structure. Dr. Tanya Smith's groundbreaking analysis of barium signatures in Neanderthal teeth has revealed that weaning was a gradual, carefully managed process that could take many months to complete. Unlike the abrupt weaning that might occur during times of crisis, normal Neanderthal weaning appears to have been timed to coincide with seasonal abundance, when alternative foods were most available and nutritious. The decision of when to begin weaning was complex and individualized, based on each child's development, health status, and family circumstances. Some Neanderthal children nursed for as long as 3 years, while others were weaned earlier based on their physical readiness and the availability of suitable solid foods. This flexibility suggests that Neanderthal mothers were attuned to their children's individual needs rather than following rigid cultural timelines. The timing of weaning often coincided with the arrival of a new baby, as mothers needed to redirect their milk production to the newest family member. However, evidence suggests that weaning wasn't rushed even when mothers became pregnant again. The gradual reduction in nursing frequency allowed children to adjust emotionally to the change while ensuring they received adequate nutrition during the transition period. Archaeological evidence reveals that Neanderthal families prepared special foods to ease the weaning transition. Sites contain evidence of carefully processed bone marrow, finely ground plant materials, and pre-chewed meats that would have been easy for newly weaned children to digest. These preparations required significant time and effort, demonstrating families' commitment to making weaning as smooth as possible for their children. The social aspects of weaning were as important as the nutritional changes. Children who were being weaned received increased attention from fathers, grandparents, and other family members who helped ease the emotional transition away from exclusive dependence on mother's milk. This expanded social support network helped children develop new attachment relationships while maintaining their bond with their mothers. The stress of weaning appears clearly in Neanderthal children's dental records, with characteristic stress lines marking the transition period. However, these stress markers are typically brief and followed by evidence of recovery, suggesting that families were successful in managing the challenges of weaning. The fact that most children survived this transition demonstrates the effectiveness of Neanderthal weaning practices. Evidence suggests that Neanderthal children participated in their own weaning process by showing interest in adult foods and gradually reducing their demands for nursing. This child-led component of weaning reduced stress for both mothers and children, while ensuring that the transition occurred when children were developmentally ready. Mothers appear to have been responsive to these signals, supporting their children's natural developmental timeline. The introduction of solid foods during weaning provided opportunities for children to learn about their environment and develop practical skills. Children learn to identify safe foods, understand seasonal availability, and participate in food preparation. These lessons were crucial for their eventual independence and survival as adults. The gradual nature of Neanderthal weaning allowed children to maintain emotional security while developing independence. Rather than an abrupt separation from their mothers, weaning represented a gentle transition toward greater self-reliance. This approach reduced trauma while building confidence in children's ability to meet their own needs. The role of fathers became particularly important during the weaning period. Archaeological evidence suggests that fathers increased their involvement in childcare as mothers reduced nursing frequency. This paternal engagement provided children with new learning opportunities while strengthening father-child bonds that would be crucial for later development. The development of food preferences during weaning had lifelong implications for Neanderthal children. Early exposure to diverse foods during the weaning period established eating patterns and nutritional knowledge that would guide children throughout their lives. Families appear to have been intentional about exposing children to the full range of available foods during this critical learning period. The seasonal timing of weaning was crucial for success. Most Neanderthal weaning appears to have occurred during spring and summer when plant foods were abundant and hunting success was high. This timing ensured that alternative foods were available and nutritious, reducing the risk of malnutrition during the transition period. The community's role in supporting weaning extended beyond individual families. Other community members provided additional foods, helped with childcare, and offered emotional support during the challenging transition period. This community involvement ensured that weaning was successful even when individual families faced difficulties. The development of independence during weaning extended beyond nutrition to include emotional and social development. Children learned to seek comfort from multiple caregivers, developed self-soothing skills, and began to form their own identity separate from their mothers. These psychological developments were as important as physical growth for children's future success. The evidence suggests that weaning was often accompanied by other developmental milestones, including increased mobility, language development, and social awareness. This clustering of developmental changes suggests that weaning was part of a broader transition toward childhood independence rather than isolated nutritional change. The management of weaning during difficult periods reveals the resilience of Neanderthal families. When environmental challenges made weaning particularly difficult, families appeared to have extended nursing periods or modified their approach to ensure children's survival. This flexibility demonstrates sophisticated understanding of child development and family adaptation strategies. The long-term effects of successful weaning appear in the archaeological record through evidence of healthy childhood development and successful survival to adulthood. Children who were weaned gradually and supportively show better growth patterns and fewer stress markers in their dental records. This suggests that the investment in careful weaning practices paid dividends in children's long-term health and development. The emotional aspects of weaning were addressed through increased physical affection, play, and attention from multiple caregivers. Archaeological evidence suggests that newly weaned children receive special treatment, including favored sleeping positions near fires and priority access to desired foods. This special attention helped children feel valued and secure during the challenging transition period. The development of eating skills during weaning required patience and instruction from adults. Children learned to chew tough meats, process plant materials, and handle food safely. These skills were essential for survival and required careful teaching during the weaning period, when children were most motivated to learn about food. The success of Neanderthal weaning practices is evident in the survival rates of children who completed the transition. Archaeological evidence shows that children who survived weaning typically continued to develop normally and reached adulthood successfully. This demonstrates the effectiveness of their family's approach to managing this crucial transition. The cultural transmission that occurred during weaning extended beyond food knowledge to include social rules, family values, and community expectations. Children learned about sharing, cooperation, and their responsibilities as growing members of the group. This cultural education was as important as nutritional instruction for children's successful integration into Neanderthal society. The evidence suggests that weaning was celebrated as a positive milestone rather than mourned as a loss. Archaeological patterns indicate that successfully weaned children received recognition for their achievement, possibly through special ceremonies or gifts. This positive framing helped children view weaning as progress toward adulthood, rather than abandonment by their mothers. Understanding Neanderthal weaning practices reveals families who approach this crucial transition with wisdom, patience, and deep love for their children. Their gradual, supportive approach to weaning created children who were nutritionally healthy, emotionally secure, and ready for the next stages of their development. The success of these practices contributed to the remarkable persistence of Neanderthal populations across hundreds of thousands of years of environmental challenges. Chapter 10: The Invisible Helpers in the Depths of Spain's Cova Negra Cave. Archaeologists uncovered the remains of a child whose story would rewrite our understanding of Neanderthal compassion. Known to science as CN46700, this 6-year-old exhibited signs of congenital conditions, including possible Down syndrome, craniosynostosis, and severe developmental delays. In modern terms, this child would require lifelong care, constant supervision, and resources that a struggling Ice Age family could barely afford. Yet this child lived, thrived, and was loved for at least 6 years, a testament to the extraordinary depths of Neanderthal family devotion. Dr. Mercedes Conde Valverde of the University of Alcalá led the team that analyzed CN46700's remains, and her findings challenged every assumption about how prehistoric societies treated disabled individuals. The child's skull showed evidence of craniosynostosis, a condition where skull bones fuse prematurely, potentially causing brain compression and developmental delays. The ear canal deformities suggested profound hearing loss that would have made communication extremely difficult. Yet the child's bones showed normal growth patterns, indicating adequate nutrition and care throughout their short life. The discovery of CN46700 represents the earliest known evidence of Down syndrome in the human family tree, but more importantly, it provides concrete proof that Neanderthal families were willing to invest enormous resources in children who could never reciprocate care or contribute to group survival in traditional ways. This wasn't a matter of briefly caring for a child who might recover. This was a conscious decision to love and support a child whose disabilities were permanent and severe. The level of care required for CN46700 would have been extraordinary. Children with Down syndrome often have heart defects, immune system problems, and difficulties with feeding that require constant attention. The hearing loss would have made teaching basic survival skills nearly impossible through normal methods. Yet someone, likely the child's mother, with support from the entire family group, provided the intensive care necessary for survival in one of history's most challenging environments. Archaeological evidence from across the Neanderthal world reveals that CN46700 wasn't unique. Sites throughout Europe and Asia contain remains of children with various disabilities who survived well beyond the point where abandonment would have been expected. These children include individuals with spina bifida, cerebral palsy, severe injuries that cause permanent disabilities, and congenital conditions that would have required lifelong support. The case of a Neanderthal child from Kafseh Cave in Israel provides another example of extraordinary care for disabled children. This child suffered severe cranial trauma that would have caused significant neurological impairment, yet survived for months afterward with evidence of careful medical attention. The healing patterns in the skull bones show that someone regularly cleaned wounds, prevented infection, and provided the specialized nutrition necessary for recovery from brain injury. The social implications of caring for disabled children in small Neanderthal groups were enormous, with communities typically comprising only 10 to 20 individuals. Dedicating one or more adults to full-time care of a disabled child represented a significant resource allocation. Yet the archaeological evidence suggests that these decisions were made repeatedly and without hesitation, indicating that Neanderthal societies place profound value on the lives of all children, regardless of their abilities. The development of specialized care techniques for disabled children reveals sophisticated understanding of medical needs and adaptive strategies. Archaeological evidence suggests that Neanderthal families created modified tools, adapted living spaces, and developed alternative communication methods for children with different types of disabilities. These innovations required creativity, patience, and deep knowledge of child development. Evidence of children with hearing impairments in Neanderthal sites suggests that families developed alternative communication systems including gestures, touch signals, and visual cues. The survival of these children indicates successful adaptation to their communication needs and integration into family activities despite their limitations. This reveals remarkable flexibility and innovation in Neanderthal parenting approaches. The nutritional care provided to disabled children appears to have been exceptional. Isotopic analysis of bones from disabled Neanderthal children often shows evidence of preferential feeding, with these children receiving higher quality protein and more consistent nutrition than might be expected given their inability to contribute to food acquisition. This pattern of nutritional support demonstrates active discrimination in favor of the most vulnerable children. The emotional bonds between Neanderthal families and their disabled children appear to have been particularly strong. Several burial sites contain disabled children interred with exceptional care, elaborate grave goods, and evidence of profound grief. These burials suggest that disabled children weren't seen as burdens, but as beloved family members whose loss was deeply mourned. The development of adaptive technologies for disabled children reveals Neanderthal innovation driven by love and necessity. Modified tools that could be operated with limited motor skills, adapted seating that provided support for children with mobility impairments, and specialized feeding implements all appear in archaeological context associated with disabled children. The role of extended family in caring for disabled children was crucial for their survival. Evidence suggests that grandparents, aunts, uncles, and older siblings all participated in providing care, creating support networks that distributed the caregiving burden while ensuring constant attention for children with special needs. This community approach to disability care allowed families to maintain these children without compromising the survival of the entire group. The development of specialized sleeping arrangements for disabled children appears in multiple Neanderthal sites. Protected alcoves, extra bedding materials, and proximity to heat sources all suggest that families modified their living spaces to accommodate children with mobility limitations, temperature regulation problems, or other special needs. These adaptations required planning and resource allocation that demonstrates ongoing commitment to disabled children's comfort and safety. The evidence suggests that Neanderthal families developed sophisticated understanding of different types of disabilities and their specific care requirements. Children with mobility impairments received different support than those with cognitive delays, and families appear to have adapted their care strategies based on each child's individual needs. This personalized approach to disability care reveals remarkable insight into human development and adaptation. Archaeological patterns indicate that disabled Neanderthal children often lived longer than might be expected given their conditions, suggesting that families became increasingly skilled at managing complex medical needs over time. The learning curve involved in caring for disabled children appears to have benefited not only the individual child, but the entire community's understanding of health, healing, and adaptation. The psychological impact of caring for disabled children on Neanderthal families appears to have strengthened rather than strained family bonds. Archaeological evidence suggests that families who successfully raised disabled children often showed evidence of increased cooperation, resource sharing, and mutual support. The shared challenge of caring for vulnerable children appears to have brought families closer together. The integration of disabled children into daily family activities reveals remarkable creativity and inclusion. Evidence suggests that these children participated in family meals, community gatherings, and even travel between seasonal camps when their conditions allowed. Families appear to have found ways to include disabled children in as many normal activities as possible, rather than isolating them from community life. The development of therapeutic interventions for disabled children appears in several archaeological contexts. Evidence of massage, heat therapy, and specialized exercises suggest that Neanderthal families developed treatment approaches aimed at improving their disabled children's function and comfort. These interventions represent some of the earliest evidence of physical therapy and rehabilitation in human history. The survival of multiple disabled children within the same communities suggests that Neanderthal groups developed cultural knowledge about disability care that was shared between families. This knowledge transfer would have improved care techniques and increased survival rates for disabled children across entire populations. The evidence indicates that disabled Neanderthal children were valued not just despite their disabilities, but sometimes because of the unique perspectives and qualities they brought to their families. Some disabled children appear to have developed exceptional skills in areas where their disabilities didn't limit them, contributing to their families' survival in unexpected ways. The long-term impact of caring for disabled children on Neanderthal society appears to have been positive, fostering development of compassion, cooperation, and innovative problem-solving that benefited all community members. The skills developed through disability care translated into better medical knowledge, stronger social bonds, and more effective crisis management for entire groups. Understanding how Neanderthal families cared for children with special needs reveals the profound depths of their compassion and the sophistication of their social organization. These weren't decisions made from abundance, but choices to love unconditionally when resources were scarce and survival uncertain. The legacy of this care appears in the archaeological record through evidence of thriving communities that valued every member regardless of their limitations or contributions. The story of C-146-700 and other disabled Neanderthal children challenges us to reconsider our assumptions about prehistoric societies and the evolution of human compassion. These families demonstrated that love for children transcends practical considerations and that the drive to protect and nurture vulnerable individuals is among the most fundamental aspects of human nature. Chapter 11. The last generation. As the last ice age began its final retreat 40,000 years ago, a Neanderthal mother in Gibraltar's Garm's cave held her infant daughter close to her chest, unaware that this child might be among the last of her kind ever born. Around them, the familiar rhythms of family life continued: fathers teaching sons to hunt, grandmothers sharing ancient stories, children playing in the cave's protective shadows. Yet invisible forces were already set in motion that would end 300,000 years of Neanderthal family traditions within a few thousand years. Dr. Clive Finlayson, who has spent decades excavating the Gibraltar caves where Neanderthals made their final stand, understands better than anyone the tragedy of their extinction. His research reveals that Neanderthal families continued their devoted child-rearing practices right until the end, maintaining the same intensive care, extended nursing, and community support that had sustained their species through countless environmental challenges. Their love for their children never wavered, but love alone couldn't overcome the demographic crisis that was slowly strangling their population. The genetic evidence from Chagarskaya cave in Siberia provides a haunting preview of the demographic catastrophe that would eventually claim all Neanderthal populations. The extreme genetic similarity among family members, typical of populations on the verge of extinction, reveals communities that have become dangerously small and isolated. These weren't sustainable breeding populations, but remnant groups, struggling to maintain genetic diversity while caring for children with increasingly narrow gene pools. The mathematical reality of small population. Genetics was working against every Neanderthal family, even those who raised their children with perfect care. When breeding populations drop below critical thresholds, typically around 500 individuals for long-term viability, genetic diversity begins to collapse. Harmful mutations accumulate faster than natural selection can eliminate them. Fertility rates decline, and birth defects become more common. The loving families at Chagarskaya, with their group size of merely 10 to 20 individuals, were trapped in a demographic death spiral that no amount of parental devotion could reverse. Dr. Svante Piobo's groundbreaking work on Neanderthal genetics reveals the full scope of this crisis. Analysis of nuclear DNA from multiple Neanderthal sites shows that effective population sizes, the number of individuals successfully reproducing, had been critically low for tens of thousands of years before extinction. This wasn't a sudden collapse, but a slow strangulation that began long before modern humans arrived in Europe. Neanderthal parents were unknowingly fighting a losing battle against their own genetics. The comparison between Neanderthal and early modern human child-rearing strategies reveals subtle but crucial differences that may have determined the fate of both species. While Neanderthal families invested enormous resources in intensive care for small numbers of children, modern human groups appeared to have developed more efficient systems that allowed them to successfully raise larger families with less individual investment per child. The birth spacing patterns between the two species tell a revealing story. Neanderthal mothers, committed to extended nursing periods of 2.5 years or more, couldn't conceive new children as frequently as modern human mothers, who weaned earlier. This longer interbirth interval meant that Neanderthal families produced fewer children over a lifetime, reducing their potential for population growth, even when survival rates were high. Recent analysis of dental enamel stress patterns shows that early modern human children experienced different patterns of childhood hardship than their Neanderthal counterparts. Modern human children showed more stress during weaning, but less stress during later childhood, suggesting that their families had developed better strategies for protecting older children from environmental challenges. This difference in stress management may have translated into higher survival rates and faster population growth. The technological revolution that accompanied modern human expansion into Europe created advantages that Neanderthal families couldn't match despite their superior individual skills. Modern humans developed compound tools, sophisticated projectile weapons, and mass production techniques that allowed smaller groups to harvest more resources with less risk. While individual Neanderthal hunters might have been more skilled, modern human groups could feed larger families with greater efficiency and safety. The arrival of modern humans in Europe around 45,000 years ago created competition for resources that Neanderthal families had never experienced. Archaeological evidence shows that modern human groups were larger, more mobile, and more efficient at exploiting environmental resources. They could support larger families while maintaining the flexibility to adapt quickly to changing conditions. The invention of the needle by modern humans around 40,000 years ago represents one seemingly small innovation that may have had enormous consequences for child survival. Better fitted clothing meant that modern human children could survive in colder environments with less metabolic stress, reducing their caloric needs and freeing up resources for other uses. Neanderthal children, despite their superior cold adaptation, were still at a disadvantage compared to modern human children with superior technology. The technological innovations that modern humans brought to European, including more sophisticated hunting weapons, better cold weather clothing, and more efficient food processing techniques, allowed them to extract more resources from the same environments where Neanderthal families had struggled for survival. These advantages meant that modern human children had better nutrition, warmer clothing, and safer shelter than their Neanderthal counterparts. The development of specialized roles within modern human societies created additional advantages for child rearing. While Neanderthal groups maintained more egalitarian structures, where everyone participated in most activities, modern human societies developed craft specialists, religious leaders, and other specialized roles that could contribute to child welfare without directly participating in hunting or gathering. This division of labor created more efficient resource use and better support for children. The social organization differences between the two species may have been crucial for child survival and population growth. While Neanderthal groups remained small and closely related, modern human societies developed larger, more complex social networks that provided greater support for child rearing. These extended networks meant that modern human families had access to more caregivers, teachers, and resources for their children. The evidence suggests that modern human societies developed more sophisticated systems for sharing risk across larger populations. When one family faced crisis, support could come from dozens of other families within their social network. Neanderthal families, operating in much smaller groups, had fewer options when disaster struck. A hunting accident, illness, or resource failure that modern human families could weather through community support might prove fatal for isolated Neanderthal groups. The development of long-distance trade networks by modern humans created additional advantages for child welfare. Access to high-quality stone for tools, rare materials for ornaments, and diverse food sources through trade meant that modern human children had access to resources far beyond what their local environment could provide. Neanderthal families remained largely dependent on local resources, limiting their options during environmental crises. The evidence suggests that Neanderthal families maintained their traditional child-rearing practices even as environmental and competitive pressures intensified. Their deep emotional bonds and intensive parenting approach had served them well for hundreds of thousands of years. But these same qualities may have become liabilities when faced with rapidly changing conditions that required quick adaptation. The psychological impact of witnessing their world change around them must have been devastating for Neanderthal parents. Archaeological evidence shows that they were aware of modern human presence, mixed assemblages of Neanderthal and modern human. Tools appear at several sites, suggesting contact and possibly exchange. Neanderthal parents would have seen modern human families thriving in environments where their own children struggled. Yet they couldn't abandon the intensive parenting strategies that defined their identity. The longer childhood dependency period that characterized Neanderthal development may have become a disadvantage when resources became scarce and competition intensified. While the extended learning period had historically produced highly skilled adults, it also meant that Neanderthal families had to support dependent children for longer periods than modern human families, reducing their reproductive efficiency. The evidence of continued cultural innovation in final Neanderthal site suggests that these families never gave up trying to improve their children's chances. New tool types, modified hunting strategies, and adaptive behaviors all appear in archaeological contexts from the final millennia of Neanderthal existence. These innovations demonstrate that Neanderthal parents were fighting to the end to give their children every possible advantage. Archaeological evidence from the final Neanderthal sites reveals families that continued to bury their dead with care, create art and ornaments, and maintain their cultural traditions even as their populations dwindled. These weren't societies in collapse, but communities maintaining their values and identity despite mounting challenges. Their commitment to their children and their way of life never faltered. The evidence from Gorham's Cave, one of the last known Neanderthal sites, is particularly poignant. The families who lived there continued to create art, process sophisticated tools, and maintain their cultural practices until virtually the end. Engravings on cave walls dated to around 39,000 years ago, just thousands of years before extinction, show that these final Neanderthal families were still passing cultural knowledge to their children and maintaining hope for the future. The climate instability that characterized the period around 40,000 years ago created particular challenges for Neanderthal child rearing. Rapid environmental changes required quick adaptation of survival strategies, but Neanderthal families were committed to intensive child care that limited their mobility and flexibility. Modern human groups, with their more efficient child rearing systems, could adapt more quickly to changing conditions. The Heinrich event 4, a period of extreme climate instability around 40,000 years ago, may have delivered the final blow to struggling Neanderthal populations. This climate event brought bitter cold, ecosystem collapse, and resource scarcity that would have tested even the most devoted families. Archaeological evidence shows that many Neanderthal sites were abandoned during this period, suggesting that entire family groups were lost to the crisis. The evidence suggests that interbreeding between Neanderthals and modern humans may have represented attempts by Neanderthal families to strengthen their gene pools and access modern human innovations. The genetic legacy of these unions lives on in modern human DNA, representing successful attempts by Neanderthal parents to ensure their children's survival through integration with more successful populations. The analysis of ancient DNA reveals that interbreeding wasn't random but followed specific patterns that suggest strategic decisions by Neanderthal families. The genetic evidence shows that most hybrid children had Neanderthal mothers and modern human fathers, suggesting that Neanderthal women were choosing to mate with modern human men to give their children access to modern human technologies and social networks. The role of infectious diseases in Neanderthal extinction may have particularly impacted children, who are typically more vulnerable to new pathogens. Modern humans arriving from Africa likely brought diseases to which Neanderthal immune systems had no resistance. The intensive care that Neanderthal families provided for sick children may have increased disease transmission within closely bonded family groups. The smaller social networks that characterized Neanderthal society may have made them particularly vulnerable to epidemic diseases. While modern human populations could absorb losses and continue functioning, Neanderthal groups that lost key members to disease might have lost essential knowledge and skills needed for survival. The death of experienced hunters, toolmakers, or healers could have catastrophic consequences for small, isolated groups. The psychological impact of population decline on Neanderthal families appears in the archaeological record through evidence of increased stress and social disruption. As groups became smaller and more isolated, the social support networks that had enabled successful child rearing began to break down. Families found themselves caring for children without the community assistance that had historically made intensive parenting possible. Evidence of increasing violence in final Neanderthal sites suggests that competition for dwindling resources was creating conflict between groups that had historically coexisted peacefully. This violence would have made child rearing even more challenging, as families had to protect their children from threats from other Neanderthal groups as well as environmental dangers and modern human competition. The final Neanderthal sites show evidence of families adapting their child-rearing practices in response to changing conditions. Some groups appear to have reduced the intensity of child care, while others maintain traditional practices despite increasing costs. These different strategies reveal families struggling to balance their values with survival necessities as their world changed around them. Archaeological evidence from the final Neanderthal occupations at sites like El Sidrón in Spain shows families that tried to maintain their traditional lifestyle until the very end. Tool assemblages, food processing techniques, and living arrangements all show continuity with earlier practices, suggesting that these families chose to preserve their cultural identity rather than dramatically alter their child-rearing approaches. The evidence suggests that some Neanderthal children may have been successfully integrated into modern human groups through adoption or intermarriage. These children would have carried forward Neanderthal genes, cultural knowledge, and possibly parenting practices into the modern human gene pool. In this sense, Neanderthal child-rearing traditions may have contributed to the development of modern human family structures. The analysis of modern human genomes reveals that Neanderthal genetic contributions were not evenly distributed, but concentrated in certain regions and functions. Genes related to immune function, cold adaptation, and pain tolerance all show strong Neanderthal influence, suggesting that some Neanderthal children who integrated into modern human populations contributed advantageous traits that persist today. The timing of Neanderthal extinction varied across different regions, with some populations persisting longer than others based on local conditions and adaptation strategies. The families that survived longest were those that successfully modified their child-rearing practices to meet changing conditions while maintaining the essential emotional bonds that define Neanderthal family life. The Iberian Peninsula, where some of the last Neanderthal population survived, shows evidence of families that maintain relatively large group sizes and cultural continuity longer than populations in other regions. These groups may have been better buffered against the demographic and environmental pressures that overwhelmed Neanderthal populations elsewhere in Europe. The evidence from Gorham's cave reveals a final population that maintained sophisticated cultural practices, including possible symbolic behavior and artistic expression, until around 28,000 years ago, thousands of years after Neanderthals had disappeared from the rest of Europe. These final families demonstrate that Neanderthal child-rearing traditions could sustain populations under favorable conditions but were vulnerable to the accumulated pressures of competition, climate change, and demographic constraints. The lessons from Neanderthal extinction reveal the complex relationship between population size, child-rearing strategies, and evolutionary success. The intensive parenting that had been Neanderthals' greatest strength became a limitation when faced with competition from groups that could reproduce more efficiently. Their love for their children was absolute, but love alone couldn't overcome the demographic mathematics that doomed small populations. The tragedy of Neanderthal extinction lies not in any failure of love or care, but in the cruel mathematics of evolution. These families did everything right according to the strategies that had sustained their species for hundreds of thousands of years. They loved their children deeply, cared for the disabled, maintained strong communities, and preserved cultural traditions across countless generations. Yet they were overwhelmed by forces beyond any family's control: climate change, demographic constraints, technological competition, and possibly disease. The final irony is that Neanderthal parenting strategies may have been too successful for their own good. Their intensive investment in each child created individuals who were highly skilled, emotionally bonded, and culturally sophisticated, but it also limited their reproductive potential. In contrast, modern human families that invested less intensively in each child could produce more offspring and ultimately overwhelm Neanderthal populations, through sheer numbers, the legacy of Neanderthal child-rearing practices lives on in modern human DNA, archaeological evidence, and our understanding of human nature itself. Their approach to parenting characterized by intensive care, extended nursing, community support, and unwavering love established patterns that continue to influence human families today. While their species didn't survive, their contributions to human child-rearing traditions represent one of their most enduring gifts to our shared heritage. The genetic analysis of modern populations reveals that we carry more than just Neanderthal DNA. We may have inherited some of their parenting instincts as well. The drive to provide intensive care for children, the willingness to sacrifice for family members, and the creation of communities focused on child welfare all show parallels between Neanderthal and modern human behavior that suggest deep evolutionary connections. Understanding why Neanderthal love wasn't enough to save their species provides sobering lessons about the relationship between parenting strategies and evolutionary success. Their story reminds us that even the most devoted families can be overwhelmed by forces beyond their control, but it also celebrates the power of love to create meaning and purpose, even in the face of ultimate failure. The last Neanderthal mother who held her child in Gorham's cave may not have saved her species, but she passed on values and behaviors that continue to define what it means to be human. The final lesson from Neanderthal extinction may be that love, while necessary for human survival, is not sufficient. Successful species need not just devoted parents, but also the demographic resilience, technological adaptability, and social flexibility to respond to changing conditions. Neanderthal families possessed the first quality in abundance, but lacked the others when they needed them most. Their tragedy reminds us that survival requires both the courage to love deeply and the wisdom to adapt when circumstances demand change. As the final embers of the cave fire die down and our journey through Neanderthal childhood comes to an end, we're left with a profound realization. These weren't the brutal cavemen of popular imagination, but devoted parents whose love for their children rivaled our own. From the nursing mothers who sacrificed their own nutrition to feed their babies for over 2 years, to the fathers who taught patient lessons in toolmaking, to the communities that rallied around disabled children who could never reciprocate their care, Neanderthals demonstrated that the bonds between parents and children are among the most powerful forces in human evolution. The genetic proof of family relationships discovered in Siberian caves, the dental records of maternal devotion written in ancient enamel, and the archaeological evidence of children learning through play all paint the same picture. Neanderthal families were bound together by love that transcended mere survival. They created the first nursing schedules, the first inclusive communities for disabled children, the first extended families where every adult invested in every child's future. Their approach to parenting intensive, nurturing, and deeply emotional served them well for 300,000 years, enabling survival through ice ages, volcanic winters, and environmental catastrophes that would have destroyed less caring societies. Yet the same qualities that made them extraordinary parents may have contributed to their extinction when faced with competition from more efficiently reproducing modern human populations. The parallels to modern parenting are impossible to ignore. Neanderthal mothers nursing their children through harsh winters mirrored today's parents making sacrifices for their children's well-being. Neanderthal fathers patiently teaching survival skills echo modern dads helping with homework. Neanderthal communities supporting disabled children foreshadow our own inclusive societies. Perhaps most remarkably, the story of Neanderthal parenting challenges us to reconsider what makes us human. If our capacity for love, sacrifice, and devoted child-rearing evolved hundreds of thousands of years ago in species that are now extinct, then these qualities aren't uniquely modern human traits. They're ancient inheritance from family bonds that stretch back to the very dawn of humanity. The last Neanderthal children may have lived 40,000 years ago, but their legacy lives on in our DNA, our archaeological record, and our understanding of the depths of parental love. Their families didn't survive, but their approach to cherishing children, building communities around their needs, and sacrificing everything for their welfare established traditions that continue to define human families today. In learning how Neanderthals raised their children, we've discovered not just their story, but our own.